Chile's President-elect Gabriel Boric announced the 24 ministers who will make up his cabinet when he takes office next March 11th. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his Russian counterpart Sergey Lavrov held talks in Geneva over the Ukraine crisis. Ghana's government announced on Friday some details of the investigations on the massive blast involving a truck that transported mines, which killed at least 13 people and injured tens more. Hi, this is From the South. I'm your news anchor, Diego Martin, from the TeleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. Chile's President-elect Gabriel Boric announced that 24 ministers who will make up his cabinet when he takes office next March 11th. Among his choices, President-elect Gabriel Boric picked current central bank head Mario Marcel as finance minister, redoubling efforts to assure investors that his government will follow a fiscally responsible path. Boric's pick for finance chief aimed at calming investors as his coalition looks to push through ambitious campaign pledges to improve public services and reduce inequality, while also prolonging 3 decades of economic stability. The incoming president has described the country's consumption boom as unsustainable, saying that he will prioritize investments and respect the environment. The violence in Colombia continues. A new massacre was reported in the department of North Santander, this being the 10th so far this year. According to the Institute of Studies for Development and Peace in La Paz, the incident occurred in the municipality of Ocaña, where 3 men from the same family were murdered. The victims were identified as Danuel Manzano Martinez, Yanel Said Martinez Bayona, and Deimer Martinez. Authorities stated that details of the massacre are still unknown. So far in 2022, there have been 10 massacres and 7 leaders and human rights defenders assassinated throughout the territory. According to the United Nations, more than 1,500 people have had to flee their homes due to the situation of violence in several municipalities of the Colombian department of Arauca. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, reported that a total of 428 families have been displaced, 21 of which are Venezuelan. The UN agency detailed that most of them are mainly self-housed and informal human settlements in Arauquita, and present need in terms of food security, hygiene, and psychosocial care. The president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, together with governors and mayors of the Caribbean island, analyzed the challenges for the current year from the Palace of the Revolution. In this framework, the president listed the key axes for the current administration.
And in fact, most work is already being done on this. Today we have to focus on economic measures to try to curb inflation, on the design of the integral support to the non-state sector of the economy, on the implementation of teleworking, on the digitalized non-face-to-face procedures to remove this problem from the population, in the approach of the municipal budgets, in the strengthening of the social programs, in the update to be made of the housing policy, in the modifications to be made in the process of lawmaking, in which we have undoubtedly been advancing the way the last laws were handled, the design of public policies aimed at young people, and the design of popular control mechanism and the ethical task for a more effective approach in the fight against corruption.
Likewise, the Cuban leaders stressed the importance of popular participation to face the adversities present.
The government's management must have a conviction that we cannot let ourselves be defeated by the way of the difficulties we have to face in a moment that is unique in the whole world and that is full of complexities, and where it is necessary in our circumstances, based on all the analysis made in recent times, to give a new vitality to the popular mobilization whose initiative strengthens us. The people participating, the people in the task of socialist construction.
In Mexico, dozens of activists demonstrated this Thursday to demand justice for the femicide of a lesbian couple that occurred over the weekend in Ciudad Juarez. Activists from the Feminist Network and members of the LGBT community protested in front of the Chihuahua State Attorney General's office, North Zone, to demand justice for Noemi Medina and Julissa Ramirez, whose dismembered bodies were found on Sunday on a highway in Ciudad Juarez. The women, aged 25 and 30, had been married last summer and had 2 girls and a boy in their custody. A total of 11 femicides occurred so far in 2022 in Ciudad Juarez, while 172 women were murdered in 2021 in that border.
11 murdered women. It's been a lot of women so far this year, and compared to other months in the past. However, the fact that a woman was murdered concerns us more because women have their children. Usually they are the caretakers of the home, and we are outraged.
The girls who were murdered belong to the LGBT community. That is why the community is present here. We demand justice. We do not want more hate crimes. We do not want them to continue killing us because of our sexual orientation.
With colorful costumes and traditional dances, residents of Diriamba in southern Nicaragua paid tribute to the town's patron Saint Sebastian. The annual celebration took place despite rising numbers of coronavirus cases in the Latin American country. Every year, the streets of the city of Diriamba are filled with color, music, and dance as part of the celebration of the patron saint's day in honor of San Sebastian. The dance of the Toro Huaco captures the attention of those present, mostly tourists who come to celebrate. However, during this year's celebrations, hundreds of Nicaraguans were also present. The patronal feast is celebrated between January 17th and 27th every year, and the celebrations begin with a Mass on January 19th.
I'm very scared to get COVID-19, but I also have a lot of faith, taking the necessary measures to avoid infection by wearing masks, using disinfectants, and not being surrounded by a lot of people, because there is enough space in the street. I have a lot of faith that nothing is going to happen to us. Those who have not been vaccinated against COVID should get vaccinated, because I have already been vaccinated. I have had all 3 vaccines, and there are people who do not take care of themselves and walk around without a mask.
We have been paying a promise to Saint Sebastian for 61 years, and this happens from generation to generation. As long as he will allow me, I am going to fulfill it, and I'm going to dance for him.
We'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Russia and United States foreign ministers described Friday's bilateral meeting in Geneva as forthright and meaningful. The meeting between Lavrov and Blinken concluded with Washington pledging to provide a written response to Moscow's security concerns related to the crisis in Ukraine. After meeting for nearly 2 hours, the diplomats said their talk was not polemical but a candid exchange of worries and ideas. Moscow heard from the U.S. a repetition of the arguments about a non-existent plan to invade Ukraine, and Secretary of State Blinken promised to give a written response to the Russian proposal on security next week. Moscow's proposal submitted last month included a guarantee that Ukraine will never join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
These papers that the State Department prepared specifically for today's meeting, they are impossible to read. Well, we have special divisions headed by official ministry staffers. It is their duty to study all of that, and a response has already followed. I don't think it needs any further comments. You could be flipping through it and opening it at any page at random to be convinced that none of it holds up to any kind of critical analysis, and in majority of cases is simply blatant lies. We had a sincere talk about it with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken today. He agreed on the need to be more sensible in conducting this dialogue, and I hope emotions boil down, although there are no guarantees. I haven't heard any point today that would justify the U.S. position on what is happening on the Russian-Ukrainian border. Only concerns, concerns, concerns.
Meanwhile, United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken reiterated the same rhetoric that his country and its allies would impose a swift, severe, and united response to any form of aggression from Russia.
Discussion today with Minister Lavrov was frank and substantive. I conveyed the position of the United States and our European allies and partners that we stand firmly with Ukraine in support of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We've been clear. If any Russian military forces move across Ukraine's border, that's a renewed invasion. It will be met with swift, severe, and a united response from the United States and our...
And also, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov met with Swiss Federal President Ignacio Cassis following Friday's critical security talks with U.S. counterpart in Geneva. Lavrov thanked Switzerland for providing the right atmosphere for dialogue and hoped to solve numerous problems on the agenda of international community. This Friday, China condemned a French parliament resolution accusing Beijing of carrying out a genocide against its Uyghur Muslim population.
Regarding your first question, the French National Assembly's resolution on Xinjiang ignores facts and legal knowledge and grossly interferes in China's internal affairs. China firmly opposes it. In the face of hard facts, a lie repeated 1,000 times is still a lie. For those who deliberately pretend to be asleep or engage in demagoguery, their words and deeds are simply not worth paying attention to.
The Peruvian President Pedro Castillo signed this Thursday a decree declaring an environmental emergency due to the oil spill on the Peruvian coast on a beach in Ventanilla, which has been affected by the ecological disaster. The president signed the text on Cavero Beach, the most affected by the spill, located in the district of Ventanilla near the capital Lima. So far, the oil has covered 1.7 square kilometers of beaches, while the amount still floating in the water covers an area of almost 1.2 square kilometers, according to the Environmental Evaluation Control Agency of the Peruvian Ministry of the Environment. The emergency comes after Peru demanded that the Spanish oil company Repsol compensate the damages caused by the spill of 6,000 barrels of oil crude oil, attributed by the company to the swell caused by the volcanic eruption in Tonga.
We cannot shy away from responsibility here. It is about taking responsibility, and in this case, we expect the company that caused the ecological disaster to take responsibility. We are in one of the places most affected by the oil spill that occurred a few days ago, and which has been the most alarming ecological disaster on the Peruvian coast in recent times.
In Venezuela, care for the environment is being an important issue at the table as the nation works to combat the effects of climate change. In a city in the west of the country, a special team is making its contribution to this battle. Our correspondent Adriana Sivori has a story.
Like common patrolmen, but they are part of the first environmental police of Venezuela. Nat Sound is a pilot project. It has only 7 officers dedicated to prevent and offer indications on ecological norms and actions.
It's organized, and the people are very aware. They really are very aware. I will say that 85% of the people have become aware of what is being done.
They can also issue fines to those who, for example, throw rubbish on the public highway. To avoid that, if you go around the city, you can see that several containers have been installed to sort and recycle rubbish.
Here people are sometimes irresponsible. They drink a soft drink and throw the can on the floor, and it's good that they reinforce that issue.
The project was promoted by the now mayor of San Cristobal in Táchira State, on the border with Colombia, in coordination with the recycling schools.
We always start from the fact that people have to be educated. We have to give them practical and simple information so that they can understand how easy it is to recycle, so that we can transform societies from the little area where we work.
The idea is that this initiative will continue to grow and replicate to ensure care for the environment and keep the city clean.
Adriana Sivori, TeleSUR.
More ships and aircraft carrying aid continue to arrive in Tonga as the international community responds to calls for urgent assistance from the Pacific island nation following a devastating volcanic eruption and tsunami. A New Zealand vessel carrying 250,000 liters of water and able to produce 70,000 liters per day through a desalination plant arrived in the island on Friday. The first flights from Australia and New Zealand landed in Tonga on Thursday with much-needed supplies of water for sanitation and hygiene, as well as shelter, communication equipment, and power generators. 2 Japanese aircraft carrying aid supplies, including water, are expected to arrive on Friday. The Unga Tonga Unga Apai volcano erupted with a deafening explosion on Saturday, triggering tsunamis that destroyed villages, resorts, and many buildings and knocked out communications for the nation of about 100,000 people. We have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Ghana's government on Friday reported the beginning of investigations on the massive blast involving a truck that transported mines, which killed at least 13 people and injured tons more. The explosion transpired on Thursday and destroyed homes and left a huge crater in Apiate, west of the country. Officials disclosed that current evidence points to a collision with 2 other vehicles as the cause of the blast. Besides the 13 fatal victims, 45 are being tended to in hospitals. President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, labeled the incident as tragic and sad, expressing his condolences to the families of the deceased. The head of state also said the government would cover the cost of hospital bills and aid those affected. Similar events have happened in Ghana in recent years. In 2012, 3 people died and dozens resulted injured from explosions at 2 fuel stations after a tanker truck full of natural gas caught fire in Accra, the capital. This Friday in Yemen, more than 60 people died and 120 were injured as a result of a Saudi-led coalition airstrikes on the central prison in Sa'da, with the death toll still on the rise. A spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross in Yemen confirmed the airstrike, saying ICRC teams were inspecting the location to verify the numbers of dead and injured. The Saudi-led coalition continued to launch its airstrikes on a number of Yemeni governorates, causing civilian casualties as more than 70 strikes were counted within the past few hours. On Thursday, the Saudi-led coalition's Air Force launched a series of violent air raids on Al Hudaydah, targeting the telecommunications center in the city, which resulted in 6 people dead, including 3 children, and 18 injured, most of whom were children. The internet was cut off in all parts of Yemen following the attack. And Syria continues its struggle to overcome the aftermath of the war and the effects of the blockade. The educational and scientific training of the children who are the country's hope for a better future constitutes one of the vital aspects of this struggle, where the role played by the Organization of Syrian Pioneers in cooperation with the Ministry of Education is highlighted. From Damascus, our correspondent Hisham News with the report.
The 38th Annual Conference of the Syrian Pioneers Organization, held this week at the Al-Assad National Library in Damascus, provided a platform for exchanging views and putting forward new ideas and projects to consolidate the institution's work and improve its interaction with other governmental entities, in particular the Syrian Ministry of Education, to advance the intellectual, psychological, and social training of the country's children.
The Al-Baas Pioneers Organization developed its work in coordination and cooperation with the Syrian Ministry of Education and the Teachers Union, and these institutions work together in a complementary way to consolidate a patriotic sense of belonging among the children and to build a new, well-educated generation through a comprehensive educational process. The Organization of Pioneers of Syria makes enormous efforts for the intellectual development of the children of the country, and they do it in coordination with the Ministry of Education, and proof of this is the virtual magazine of pioneers that was launched as part of this work, that I hope it will count on the participation and contribution of all the children from Syria to enrich the infantile culture.
The participation of the Pioneers Organization in the development of primary schools courses, the creation of a public school as a national center for children's activities, the launch of an interactive virtual platform of the Pioneers magazine, as well as the representation of the organization in legal and judicial bodies defending children's rights, are the main goals to be achieved this year to improve the level of educational and scientific training of the new generations in Syria.
This virtual magazine platform aimed at children complements educational courses developed by the Ministry of Education, and we hope that we will continue the work that help us to keep up with technological and scientific progress worldwide in order to contribute in the most suitable way to the reconstruction of our homeland.
The launching of the virtual platform of the Pioneers magazine takes place within the framework of meeting the global and modern educational parameters in the field of distance learning in order to reach all the children of the country at any time, despite all the difficult circumstances, especially the limitations caused by the pandemic of the new coronavirus that is sweeping the world.
The National Museum in Damascus recently hosted the children's exhibition Fragrance of Jasmine in November, with the participation of 500 pioneers from all over the country, one of numerous activities that the Syrian Pioneers Organization, despite the difficult conditions resulting from the war, the blockade and the COVID-19 pandemic, has not ceased to organize as part of its work to develop the creative and innovative talents of children, to root their attachment and belongings to the homeland, and to consolidate their faith in a better future.
هشام والنوس TeleSUR Damascus, Syria.
We've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gil Martin. Thanks for watching.